No, you can go. It's okay if it's comfortable. Okay. We're not starting immediately. There's like oh, it is. It's 2:50. Okay, so we're going to start. I was tasked to chair this session. I don't know much about this material, and somebody who works with me, Fabrice Ben Hamouda, was there when they gave me the session, and he said, "What are you going to ask at the end of the talk?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Ask, did you implement this for every talk?" So since you know what my made-up question is, you can prepare for it, but then if others have questions, I would appreciate it. And we will start the first talk, and the first speaker is Fukan Liu.
Thanks for the introduction. The title of this talk is coefficient growth in a complex of plan layers. So my name is Tal Rabin, and this is a joint work with Renography, Netherlands, Wilmer, and Category disorder. So let us directly move to the study process. So we will focus on a special type of SPN ciphers for the extension field F2 to the N. So as illustrated by this figure, the input of this cipher is composed of n words, and each word xi is an element in this final field. The run function is composed of the xbox defined by the power map and the affine layer defined by an F2 linearized affine polynomial Bx, and the linear layer defined by the matrix N and the common run P and run constant additions. So indeed, AES also follow this structure, but A is relatively small, so case. So as you can observe from the formula of V, apart from the constant part, the remaining part is composed of W monomials whose exponents are 2 to the H1, 2 to the H2, 2 to the H3, 3 until 2 to the HW. So we for W the density of this polynomial for convenience. And in this work, we focus on very special case where the exponent of the power map is 2 to the D plus 1 because it has the lowest LG 2, and it has some concrete applications in FHE, MPC, like mimic and checklist. So for this special case, we will study the problem as how to upper bound the algebraic degree after R-rounds. So specifically, we consider the case where each input word xi is a linear polynomial in a variable x, so it can be written in this way where ui1, ui0 are randomly chosen constants. So for such an input, we aim to find the upper bound of the algebraic degree denoted by delta r after r rounds. So all the polynomials I'm discussing here is a polynomial in this polynomial range. So first we need to know the definition of the algebraic degree of a polynomial in this polynomial range. So it is just defined by the maximum Hamming rate of the exponents of monomials with non-zero coefficients. So let us give some examples. So for this polynomial, the algebraic degree is 2 because the Hamming rate is 2, and for this polynomial, the algebraic degree is 3 because the Hamming rate is 3 here. So for convenience, I mean, when writing the polynomials, we simply treat the coefficients of all possible monomials in x as 1. So, although the input polynomial is like this, we treat all the coefficients in 1. So it becomes like simply x plus 1. And we denote the polynomial of R rounds by PR. And we are interested in the algebraic degree of this polynomial PR. So specifically, we are interested in three problems. First, how does W influence the growth of the algebraic degree of PR? So note that W is the density of B. Second, how to efficiently find B with the smallest W to ensure the fastest growth of the algebraic degree, because in some previous designs, the designers they are not aware of this, so they made some secure design. That's why we study these problems. And at third, from the perspective of attackers, we want to efficiently upbound the average algebraic degree for arbitrary B. So to solve these three problems, so we will first study some properties of the polynomial PR, because we need to understand the algebraic degree of PR. So and we also introduce another polynomial PRS, which represents the polynomial after the S-box transformation at the R round. And as you can observe, we do not consider the influence of the matrix because the set of all possible monomials remain invariant after this linear layer. So no new monomials will be added to this set. So, or in other words, we ignore the influence of cancellations in monomials. And for large finite field, for large finite fields, this indeed happens with very low probability. And also note that the algebraic degree of this polynomial is the same of this polynomial because B is linear. So to study the algebraic degree of PR, first we consider some small r. So for the input, it is simply x plus 1. And for the case r equals 1 to 1, we can simply get P1S and P1. So we just calculate how the polynomial P0 evolves through the first S-box and the first BX. So it's relatively easy. And we note that only these three possible monomials will appear in P1S, and only this set of monomials will appear in P1. And maybe this representation is not convenient, so we will describe the polynomial by its exponents. Specifically, we introduce a set WR to denote the set of all possible exponents in the polynomial PR, and same for WRS. In this way, so W0 is simply 0, 1 because so the exponent is 1, 0, and for WYS, it is the set of exponents are these four values, and we can rewrite it in this way. So here the two variables A11, A12 are three binary variables. So there are four elements in this set, and we can also write W1 in this new way. So here these two A11, A12 are three binary variables. But the problem maybe so computing from P0, computing P1 from P0 is relatively easy because only one round, but for the second round, it's not so intuitive. So, and this is very crucial to understand how we find the properties of PR. So let me give some more details. So specifically for the second round, the input Y, so we consider how the polynomial evolves through the second S-box. So for the input Y, it is a polynomial, and whose monomials can always be represented in this way. And for the left part, colored in red, we can choose any possible polynomial for it and calculate Y to the D and get this. So the exponents will change. And for the right part, colored in blue, we also can independently choose any possible monomial for Y, and then this will be a possible monomial in the polynomial after the second S-box transformation. So as you can note, as you may observe, there are four binary variables, A11 prime, A12 prime, and we can rename these four variables with us A21, A22, A23, A24. I mean, they're just three binary variables, so we can use any name for them. So we can get W2S, and computing W2 from W2S is relatively easy. We only need to add these to the experiment. This is directly based on the how to compute the polynomial evolves through B. And working similarly, we can get W3S, W3, W4S, W4, but as you may find, it will be very long and it's not easy to write down. So we need to find a concise mathematical description for the set WRS. So for this, we will first introduce a set VRW. So I will simply call it V. And this set is just a set storing all possible values by summing up R-1 elements from the set H1, H2, and HW. So for example, for this set V2W, it is indeed this set. And for this set, it is indeed this set. So I just need to find a way to describe it. And with this set V at hand, so we can then find a concise mathematical description for the set WRS. So it can be described in this way. And still we have the free binary variable ARV. And so as you may note, we do not have H1, H2, H3 normal because we introduced another variable FV, and FV is an element, can be any element in this set. Of course, we further have some conditions inside this FV. So how many A and how many FV are here? We can simply get that there are 2 to the R possible free binary variables and 2 to the R possible FV. And maybe this is still not straightforward. So let us consider this figure. That indeed is easy to understand. So we have these so many FV, and we write them in R+1 rows. And at the ith row, we have so many FV, and these so many FV will be added to the same number R minus I times D. And for the conditions here, it is just explained by the arrows in the figure. I mean, so for the ith row and the I+1 row, so this FV will be equal to this FV 1 by 1. So this will be equal to this will be equal to this. So it's just like this. So if you have this figure in your mind, then all the results in this paper is easy to understand. So note that FV is an element in a set V. So we can have many possible valid assignments to this FV. And for each valid assignment, we can get a subset of the WIs, and we denote it by WRSF. So it can be described in this way. So here, FV now is fixed. It's no more a variable, so it's fixed. So we will have many possible valid assignments to FV, and we will get many such subsets. And the union of this subset will be WRS. So to studying the algebraic degree of PR, we need to find the elements with the maximum Hamming weight in WRS. So for this problem, we can tend to study the properties of the subsets under all possible assignments. And we want to find some common features inside all these subsets. So to do this, we first need to solve the problem how to find the element with the maximum Hamming weight in each subset. To do this, we can convert this subset into a vector of integers denoted by mu r. And yeah, this is the algorithm, but we can explain it in one word. I mean, so the ith element in this vector just represents the occurring times of I in all these 2 to the I exponents modular n. So, and after getting these vector of integers, finding the element with the maximal Hamming weight in the subset WRSF can be reduced to solve this real structure optimization problem. And this problem can be solved in linear time. But the problem here is we have many possible valid assignments, and we need to solve this problem many times. So it's very inefficient. And this is indeed the efficiency of the previous technique. So we want to overcome this problem. But I will show how we overcome this obstacle at last. So so before it, we will first study some problems about so how the density of V influences the growth of the algebraic degree. So first we consider the very special case, W equals to 1. In this way, there is only one element in this set. So we only have so we only need to solve the optimization problem once, and we can solve it in linear time. Yeah, we can get the accurate upper bound of the algebraic degree, but this is not the interest in this paper. Instead, we are interested in a general upper bound of the solution to the optimization problem for any ND if W equals to 1. By using this triangle inequality, we find that the solution to the optimization problem can be upper bounded by this formula. So this means for the case W equals to 1, the algebraic degree increases at most quantitatively. So this gives an general upper bound. So, but of course, you can get the accurate upper bound by solving the optimization problem. But for how about the case when W is larger than 1? So, so for these cases, we tend to study the necessary condition on the exponential growth of the algebraic degree. I mean, this is the fastest growth of the algebraic degree. We find that there should exist a valid assignment to this so many FV such that the following 2 to the R elements are different. So you should note that these are all the exponents in the mathematical description of WRS. But now we consider them modular n. So to ensure all these 2 to the R elements are different, it's indeed quite easy to follow, to observe that. So we also write them in R+1 rows, and at the same row, we can note that they will be the same number will be added to this so many FV, and to ensure these 2 to the R elements are different, we need to ensure FV can take the size of the possible values of V should be larger than this binomial coefficient. So that's why we can deduce another necessary condition on the exponential growth of algebraic degree. And according to this necessary condition, we can give a very maybe a beautiful beautiful explanation for the density of B on the growth of algebraic degree. Specifically, for the case W equals to 2, 3, 4, the sharp exponential growth can be achieved for at the most the first 3, 6, and 9 rounds respectively. That means if W equals to 2, at the fourth round, the algebraic degree must be smaller than 2 to the 4. If W equals to 3, the algebraic degree as the 7th round must be smaller than 2 to the 7. So they can never be, the sharp exponential growth can never be achieved at these rounds, and of course, after these ones. And as designers, we may need to we want our design secure. So we want the algebraic degree can increase in the fastest way. So we also propose an efficient algorithm to check the necessary condition. But as you may also note that this is just a necessary condition. But and we think if this is satisfied, it should grow in the fastest way. I mean, the cancellations occurs with very low probability, so we can rely on this. So to do this, we can given W and H1, H2, HW, we can compute. First, we compute R+1 arrays, and you should have this figure in your mind. And each array indeed represents so each row. So and we can update the array in this way. Specifically, yeah, I mean if AI plus 1j is 1, it means j can be chosen for this FV. So it's just the meaning is just this is the meaning of this arrays. And to ensure in this way to satisfy the necessary condition, we should be able to choose so many different indices of AI plus 1 such that the values in this array and these indices are all 1. And this only means this means we can take the FV can only take values from this set. And the second condition is that for a set of so many indices j chosen for the array AI plus 1, this set of indices, I mean, of course, they have the same size, has to be chosen for AI. And this corresponds to the condition inside this FV. So this should be equal this. So I think it's easy to know this. So and then it's easy to observe that it is just a very simple decision problem, and we can solve it with some off-the-shelf solvers. And so at the last, let's go back to the very first question. That's how to upbound the algebraic degree for the arbitrary affine layer B. And we find some common features in the vector of integers for all the subsets. That's all the n elements of these vectors. The sum of all the elements in this vector is 2 to the r. And for the set of indices where the values are non-zero, it is a subset of a set Z, and the size of this set should be smaller than beta, where beta and Z are all fixed and can be efficiently pre-computed. So now we have a better description. So different from the previous optimization problem, we do not need to solve many optimization problems. We only need to solve this one optimization problem because all the vector VR share some common features, and this optimization problem can also be efficiently solved according to our experiments. So just like this, I do not have too much time. So let us move to the conclusion. So first, so we started a very special case of experience ciphers, and we found that for the case W equals to 1, the growth of the algebraic degree must be below the quantity growth. And we also built the theory to explain the relation between the density of B and the growth of the algebraic degree. We also proposed efficient algorithm to check whether the exponential growth can be achieved for a given NDB. And we also propose an algorithm to upper bound the algebraic degree for arbitrary affine layers. That's all. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay, so let's thank the speaker again. We have to You have to wait 2 minutes. Is the third speaker here? Are any of the authors of the third paper here? You're an author? And where's your speaker? Oh, you are the speaker. Oh, I didn't see. You raised your hand? Okay. Yes. So we can start. This talk is being given by Marcus Schoeffenegger.
Yeah, welcome to this talk and thanks for the introduction. So this is joint work together with Lorenzo, Young, Christian, Roman, and Ju. And yeah, it's about yet another zero knowledge focused hash function, which is called Griffin. But first, before actually talking about the hash function, let me give you a short introduction into this area. So the area is computational integrity proof systems. And what do we usually try to achieve? We usually try to prove that something has been computed correctly. So this, in theory, this can be any program. We try to focus like problems which can easily be represented by additions and multiplications. So for example, a permutation call, or also like a merge tree implication, for example. So this is very often used in practice. And the main idea of these proof systems is that the verification post should be sublinear in the program size. So we don't want the verifier to recompute the whole program to check, but the proof should be sublinear in size. And potentially, this can also be done with zero knowledge. So this is usually something you can add property. And yeah, some proving frameworks out there are, for example, Snarks, and so there are many different nowadays. And every month there's a new. Yeah, but what is the connection to symmetric crypto? So many of these proof systems actually, as their core components, use symmetric primitives. And the thing is that more like traditional classical primitives like the AS or Ketchuk, they're usually not so efficient in this setting. So we try to use more specialized ones. All right, so how does such a proof system usually work? So usually we have two steps. We have first the arithmetization and then the commitment. And the arithmetization, is usually just the conversion of the program in some polynomials. And so this is the first step. And the second step is then we try to prove the validity of those polynomials. The nice thing is that mostly we can combine any arithmetization approach with any commitment techniques. We can build multiple new frameworks of proving systems in general. And in this talk, and also which is done for close comparisons in literature, we will focus on the arithmetization step, and in particular on arithmetizing a hash function. So how can a hash function be represented in this proving system? So usually arithmetization consists then at the end of some a set of some constraints. And in general, we say the fewer the number, so the smaller the number of constraints is, the better it is in general. So of course, some other properties like the degrees of the constraints and so on are also important, but in general, the fewer constraints, the better. And now let me actually come to the symmetric function concepts in the past, so the relation to symmetric cryptography. So there have been various concepts in the past, so we'll go through them very quickly, but in essence, there are three main categories. The first type is like we try to build a symmetric function which uses low degree components only, and we work usually over a larger prime field here. And of course, this is good because low degree constraints are good in the proving system. Usually these functions are quite fast because we don't have many multiplications, but we do have many rounds, so a large latency because we need to reach some degree for like protection against interpolation attacks and so on. And often we also have more constraints in the end. And yeah, some examples are listed here. So the second type is I like to call it like fluid or even non-procedural, it was named before.
So we try to have something which is high degree in the plane evaluation. So for example, x to the power of 1/3. If we are a large prime field, this is a high degree function. But we can also represent it as a low degree function if we like skip the, if we replace the input and the output here, change them. So we have like an efficient representation in the proof system as a constraint, but we still have a high degree function plane. So usually this is quite slow because we have many multiplications to do here, but we need fewer rounds, of course, and additionally we also have fewer constraints. And this is actually the type where Griffin, so the hash function I'm going to present today, falls into, and also Animal, which was presented at this conference. Yeah, and then just for completeness, there's also a third type where we try to use lookup tables. This is usually very fast. We need even fewer rounds in a symmetric primitive, but it depends really on the previous system if that's efficient or not. It may be very inefficient, but also very efficient. It depends on what we do with these lookup tables. All right, yeah, and as I've said, we will focus on this second type in this presentation. So we start from the nonlinear layer of the primitive, and we focus on SVM constructions since they have been chosen in the past. They are very prominent for this use case. And why do we start with the nonlinear layer? Well, because usually for most optimization approaches, the linear layer is not so important. It doesn't really increase or change the cost a lot. So if we think about the nonlinear layer and SVM construction, there are different approaches, of course. There's the classical SVM, like in Shark, there's this partial SVM, which for example, which Zorro uses from 2013. And then there are also different methods like rescue, which is also a similar hash function method. And they, for example, use different rounds or steps in the SVM construction. So the thing is, all those SVMs are essentially with some power modes. So some monomials, they may be of high degree or low degree for these different proving systems, but all of them are monomials. And if we try to have a low degree, and if we work on a larger prime field or prime field in general, then we need at least a degree of 3 to these S boxes, at least nonlinear layer, because otherwise we wouldn't have a commutation. We want to have convertibility, of course. And most practical use primes even require you to use like degrees of 5 or 7, because otherwise there are not communications. This means that we have already some lower limit on the number of implications we need, at least for the whole construction. Well, this is one property. And the second one, of course, if we use only low degree functions, then we have again this large number of rounds, which is not very good because we have many linear layers also. They're usually extensive in the plane implementation, and we also reach a high latency at the end. So Rescue had this idea in 2019 to mix rounds with a low degree function with rounds with a high degree function in order essentially decrease the number of rounds, but have the same efficiency. But the problem is, of course, that these high degree functions are quite expensive in the plane implementation, and they need many multiplications. So when thinking about Griffin or what we can do better, there are mainly two directions. So the first direction is to optimize this SVM approach, because actually we don't need this high degree function for every single state word or in the whole nonlinear layer. We just need it for a single state. Because if we do that, then already the degree growth is the same, and we already have this protection against algebraic attacks. Of course, we need maybe some rounds to get through diffusion and so on in all the statements, but usually this is already sufficient. And then it's also much faster in the plane implementation. So this is the first direction regarding the SVM approach. But then we said, well, but if we need at least degree 3, maybe we can go even lower. Maybe we can go to degree 2. So we try with a Feist network, but of course it allows you to use something which is non-invertible, like the square function in the prime field. But we realized after doing some algebraic tests that the Feist network is not really very competitive in terms of algebraic security. So it was okay, but we needed many more rounds for the Feist networks, and in the end it wasn't very efficient in the end. So what we did now is, instead of the addition in the classical Feistel, we considered to use a multiplication function simply because well, our reasoning was that this leads to a nonlinear diffusion instead of a linear one, and maybe this also leads to better protection against attacks. And degree 3, if we use a multiplication, is only 1 higher than 2, so it's maybe not that bad. And that already brings me to the first main component of the paper, of Griffin in general, which we call Horst, because of Horst Feistel. And what it is, well, it is a multiplicative Feistel network, in essence. And we can also see, for example, so this is at the top of the slide, it's presented with 2 state words. We can see if we set the G function to 1, then we have the classical Feistel one. So it's a generalization. And of course, there's another property though. We need to be careful, because if g is 0, so if the function g is equal to 0, then we don't have a limitation anymore. So we need to take care of that property. And there's also the generalization, which is the same as for two-state, but just for a larger state. So the main question here is, okay, this is all nice, but how do we actually choose g? Because we need that g is not 0 for any input, so we need such a g that essentially ensures invertibility of the whole construction. And well, we cannot use any low degree monomial. We cannot use the square root, because x squared is 0 for 0 input, and this is true for any monomial, of course, for any polynomial. But what we can do is we can actually exploit the fact that x squared is not a permutation, because there's this solution formula. If we choose alpha and beta, which are public constants, if we choose them, but there's such that there are no square in the prime field we're working over, then the below formula here, of course, if we set it to 0, has no solutions, which means that for any x, for any input, there's no 0. So we can use such a g, and g will never be 0, or it doesn't really matter what the input will be. And this is nice, because we eventually arrive at a degree 2 function for this g. Okay, so let me quickly recap what we did here. So we have first this. So if we have a round function, we have in the first part this SVM construction, which is very small, because it is only applied in 2 state words. So we first have this high degree function, then the lower degree one. And the second lower degree one is actually important, because it means that in this part we also have a high degree if we go in the inverse direction. So this is the motivation here. And then for all the other state words, so for example, if you have a 3-word state, then we do this once. But if you're a larger state, then most of the state is going to this cross construction. For all the other state words, we have this. And L is not really important. L is just some linear combination of these inputs. So it's a single variable here. And of course, since we have degree 2 for Horst, we have degree 3 in total for this part here, because we always have the multiplication by the input elements. Yeah, so what do we achieve now? Well, essentially, we have a very fast degree growth in both directions, because we use the over d in the one direction, the 1 over d in the other direction. And sorry, in the same direction always. And we always have the constraints of degree d here. So this is similar to like the side one rescue to all the others here, which means that, for example, if we're forced to use a degree of 5, 7 to have a permutation, we also have a degree of 5 or 7 in this part, but this is only like for the first 2 states, so not for the rest of the state. And the rest of the state is usually larger, because this is the first SVM part is only 2 state for the first two. We don't have to be 2, which would be the case if we do some Heisel network, of course, but we have to be 3 because of this multiplication, but this is independent of the d and the t. So for any degree we choose in the first part, and for any prime, we always have a fixed degree 3. And in some proving systems where the particular degrees are important of the constraints, this is actually pretty good. So there are some proving systems where only the maximum degree is important, then this doesn't really help. But in some others, this helps, of course. And what we also did, because we were interested, how is Horst actually comparing to Feistel? So what we did is, we also tried the security of Griffin. So Griffin is the name of the implementation. We tried the security with Feistel instead of this Horst distribution. So a classical additive Feistel, and I will not go into much detail, because we didn't do a formal analysis. We were just focusing on our construction. But essentially, we have 2 strategies. So kernel basis strategy essentially refers to an equation solving approach, and usually we'll try to introduce some variables in order to keep the degree lows, degrees low, and then you try to solve the system. And the thing is that we tried 2 strategies, and for the first one, it was rather hard to get a precise security estimate, because usually there are like 3 steps in the attack, and as a designer, you show that the first step is actually very expensive already. This is not possible here. It's also seen with other fast implementations. And for the second strategy, we had the problem, or we had a comparison. But if we compared it with the Feistel constructions in the same degree, so same total degree, so potentially a larger number of rounds, we found that the Grömer basis computations were much faster for the Feistel construction, which indicates at least that the Horst construction is a bit better than the Feistel against this. But of course, this is just a suggestion, indication. We didn't do any formal analysis, and maybe this can be done in the future. All right, so what is the specification of the whole implementation then? Well, we have a very normal classical round function. We first have a define layer. This is not so interesting, so we use a very efficient matrix, which has small entries, because we can use mainly additions instead of multiplications to have the linear layer here. But the more interesting part, of course, is the nonlinear layer, where we essentially split the state into two parts. The first two statements go through this SPM permutation, the other statements, all the other ones, go through this Bust permutation. So this is essentially then the whole. Okay, so now we have a permutation, a cryptographic permutation. So what do we do with it? So in these use cases, like these proving systems, something which is very often used is hash functions. So we can build a hash function, of course, by using this batch construction, which is shown above. So this is one nice thing. We can also use a compression function, because in many cases, what we really need is to construct a Merkle tree. And for example, if we construct a binary Merkle tree, then we just need a compression of two elements into one element. And we don't really need this capacity element, so we're a bit more efficient if we just use a compression function. And of course, this is also been done in other implementations like for Animal, which I. Okay, so about the security, so essentially there are two large classes of attacks. There's the statistical ones and the algebraic ones. And for the statistical ones, we have a small problem, because we cannot use very nice approaches like the white space strategy, because of course our round functions are really aligned due to the host part. So this is not possible. It's possible for other permutations like Asylum, Rescue, but it's not possible here. But we are lucky, because if we are mainly working over a larger prime field, then we actually have a differential probability which is very low for a single element, and we also show this in the paper. So we can use a very simple argument for the statistical security for our computation, because we mainly work with very large fields. And then there's, of course, algebraic attacks, which usually are a bit stronger against this type of primitives, because usually the more circuit friendly, or the lower the number of constraints and the degrees of the constraints are, the better or the easier it's usually also to write down an equation system for these functions. So usually these algebraic attacks are a bit more complicated here. So first there are integration attacks and higher order differential attacks, of course, and they are avoided maybe by very high degrees and high density. But the main problem remains these basis attacks, and here also we analyze some different strategies for those in the paper. And it seems actually that the non-aligned approach, so the nonlinear mixing and also in general the Gauss approach, seems quite good in this regard. And yeah, I won't go into the details here of the rounds needed, but for most practically relevant instances, so practically relevant means like 128-bit security and 3 state words, 10 state words, and so on. We need around 10 rounds for security. So this can be from 10 to 15, but it's not like 40 or 50, which is often the case for design for other applications. So at the end, let me also very briefly talk about the performance of this function, of course. So we started with a design. In the beginning, we actually had 2 different round functions for 2 different purposes. But at the end, we said, well, this is really too complicated. Let's keep one round function, try to optimize that round function in order to be like a good trade-off between different alphabetization techniques and also the plane performance. And that's what we did. So our round function is quite good in all the techniques, but at the end we saw that it's actually very good for SMART, or for this rank 1 constraints, where the efficiency is closely related to number of multiplications you need for constraints. So that's much better than competitors, and in particular much better than Poseidon, which is the gold standard right now. We also see in the slide. For the other alphabetization techniques like air and Plonk, there are many. It's very close to the currently best ones. So it's sometimes a bit worse than the currently best ones, but the plane performance is quite good because we use this single high-degree function only once. Yeah, with the reasons also below. So yeah, about the performance. So this is only with rank 1 constraint systems. So this is mainly focused on the number of multiplications for all constraints. And we can see that, for example, for any states as here listed, so for example, states with 3 or 4, we see that the number of constraints we need for an entire permutation call is much less than, for example, the number we need for Poseidon. And yeah, Poseidon is currently the standard, so it includes a lot. Also, the proving time. So this is not the time for implementation for the claim, but the time for an enter proof of the implementation is also much lower because we essentially save those kind of implementations. And this is all for 128 bit security level. Of course, it changes if you go to higher security, but 128 bit seems to be very common. So yeah, let me already give a conclusion here. So we initially focused on a good trade-off between many proving systems and also the plain implementation. And we built around functions specifically for this purpose. At the end, it was very good for the ranking constraint systems and also quite good for the others. It's also a new strategy for a design strategy of implementation. So maybe it's not only good here, but also good in other use cases. So essentially this merging of the SVM and this force, which is Python. And this is also the reason why this function is called Griffin, because it merges two animals, or in this case, two functions in one implementation. Griffin is used in various projects already. So for example, it's used in the Winterfell library by Facebook. And Winterfell essentially is used to facilitate these zero-knowledge proofs. In this Winterfell, I believe it's using the error recognition. And yeah, there's also some future work. So for example, is the non-aligned approach better against the private attacks than the aligned approach? Of course, the problem is that the security against statistical attacks cannot be argued so easily because we cannot use things like the white space strategy. But maybe it's better against algebraic attacks. And yeah, another point for future work. So the Horst versus Feisty, so the proving system essentially Horst increases the by 1. So compared to Feisty, we use a squaring function. So this is not so good for the proving system, not a big difference, but it's not so good. But in a classical scenario, if you think about hardware implementation or even software implementation, then the multiplication, the addition are usually similarly expensive. So there's not a big difference, and I believe an AND gate is in some architectures even cheaper than an XOR gate if you talk about hardware implementations. So maybe Horst is even good in some more classical use cases, not really related to implementation and technical use cases, but like classical or ordinary implementation. All right, thank you very much.
Are there any questions?
So we have questions. So you mentioned that's systems.
Yeah, so we didn't go in that direction at all. So, but since we have a very generic thing, for example, the idea of this G function, of course, this works in a larger prime, but it works for any prime. We didn't go in that direction, but since it's so generic, maybe it's even good for other use cases. Mainly due to this, mainly due to algebraic attacks and so on. Of course, algebraic attacks are less of a problem in more classical ciphers and so on than here. That this is true, of course. But maybe it can be useful.
Other questions? I have a question. Not whether you implemented it. So what percent of the time are you working in the X to the 1 minus D, 1 over D?
Yeah.
And if it's a huge percent, do you think that there are ways that you might be able to improve and reduce your times?
Mm-hmm. So it's actually a huge percentage. I don't know the number now, but it can very well be like 30–40% of the implementation, maybe even more. So yes, so there's this approach with these lookup tables, which essentially allow you to use any function. This can be highly loaded, whatever you want, but which is very, very fast in plain because either use a lookup or some bit combination, of course, which then results in a lookup. And this is quite great. The only problem is that for some of these proving systems, we can do lookups with 32 bits, for example, because we have actually a commitment to a lookup instead of the actual lookup, so we can do this. But for many proving systems, we're quite limited. So for example, we can only do 18-bit lookups because then it limits the cost of the FFT, which is then required. So I have no concrete idea how to do this for very large fields, but for smaller prime fields, it's already possible using these lookups to essentially replace this simulation.
Any other questions? Okay, let's thank the speaker again. For the last talk of the session, talk is going to be given by Irati Mentarela Ayala. I hope it's close enough. Yeah, start speaking.
Is it on now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay,
One question. Do you want me to tell you 21 minutes?
sure. Okay, so yeah, thank you for coming. I'm surprised to see so many people here, given there is a free afternoon and you could just go. But yes, so I will be talking today about cryptanalysis of symmetric primitives over rings, but mainly a key recovery attack on Rubato. And this is joint work with many other great co-authors, all of them scattered around the room. So I'm pretty sure that if you have any questions or doubts or anything in the end, we can all figure it out. So that's great. Yeah, okay, well. So Rubato is a family of ciphers that was proposed by Ha et al. At Eurocrypt last year. And it is designed to be used in a transciphering framework for approximate FAG. The novel idea of this family of ciphers is that it's a symmetric cipher of low algebraic degree, in which some Gaussian noise is introduced. And the authors use this to argue that then only a few rounds are enough to achieve the security that they want to achieve. So for those of you that are familiar with Hera, Rubato is pretty similar to it, but there is a crucial difference, which is that Hera is defined over field FP for P prime, whereas this condition is relaxed in the case of Rubato to simply a ring set Q. And this will be important, just keep it in mind. So some notation, Q, as I said, will be an integer greater or equal to 2. Then we have set Q, which is set modulo Q, but centered at 0. The state of Rubato will be denoted by X, which is a matrix of dimension B squared with entries in set Q. And the block size N is B squared, the dimension of this matrix. So for lambda bit security, Rubato takes as input a symmetric key, K in set Q to the N, a nonce of length lambda, and a counter I. And it outputs a block of key stream set in set Q to the L, where now L is smaller than N. And how do we encrypt the message? So we have a message vector mu in R to the L. And what we do is we scale this message by a scaling factor that depends on the norm of mu. And we round this value and we add it to the key stream that we got by running Rubato previously. And we do this mod Q. So the use case of Rubato, we have the RTA framework, better explained in the Hera paper. But basically, we have a client and a server. The client will run Rubato with secret key, a nonce, and the counter, and encrypt the message of their liking, giving a ciphertext. And this ciphertext will be sent to the server. On top of this, the client will also encrypt the key using a homomorphic scheme F for the V, and will send this encryption of the key to the server as well. Then the server will take this encrypted key, the nonce, and the counter, and run Rubato homomorphically. And this will give us an encryption of a set of the key stream that is in FV, which can then be subtracted from an FV encryption of the ciphertext. And then by doing some half bootstrapping, we can go from the FV setting to the CKKS setting and just keep doing stuff homomorphically. And then Rubato has saved to serve its purpose. So the components of Rubato, there are three main components. First of all, we have the add round key. So we have X in set Q to the N. And what we do is we add K times the output of some XOF that has as input the nonce and the counter. The linear layer of Rubato is composed of two consecutive operations. So one of them is mixed columns and the other one is mixed rows. Mixed columns takes the state X and multiplies this by a matrix MV from the left. And mixed rows multiplies this value by the transpose of the same matrix from the right. So the value of this matrix varies depending on the instance of Rubato we're using. There are three possibilities. This V could be 4, 6, or 8. But in any case, we have the first row that is fixed by a vector, and the next rows will just be cyclic rotations of this first vector. And that's the linear part. And then we have a degree to pi still that takes as input x in set q to the n and outputs x1, x2 plus x1 squared, x3 plus x2 squared, etc. So given these components, the round function of Rubato is given as follows. We have the linear layer first, mixed columns and mixed rows. Then we rearrange these into a vector so we can apply phi still. We go back to matrix and we add round key. And that's pretty much it, except the final round is slightly different from the rest of the rounds in that there is a second linear layer right after the phi still. So we have linear layer, phi still, linear layer once again, add round key, and finally we truncate the last n minus l elements of the matrix or vector. So all in all, this is the R round of Rubato. We have this initial value from 1 to n. We add round key and we apply rounds until we arrive to the final round, and then comes the novelty of Rubato, which is adding Gaussian noise. So this E is sampled from a discrete Gaussian distribution that has been 0 and variance alpha q squared over 2 pi. And this is added to the rest that I just explained. And this gives us the key stream. So these are the parameters proposed by the authors of Rubato. There are 6 of them. 3 of them claim to have 80-bit security and the other 3 128. But the interesting thing to look at here is the number of rounds, which is the last column, which in which we see that only, according to the authors, that only 2 rounds are sufficient for most of the cases in order to achieve this security, which is quite surprising. So because it is surprising, we looked into it and we came with a key recovery attack on Rubato that doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. So there are 3 main steps to consider here. The first one is we recover the key and the noise, but modulo some factor m of q. Then we recover the positions in the key stream such that no noise has been added. So the noise sample from the alpha q was 0. And finally, we recover the key by setting up a system of polynomial equations using this information of the positions with 0 noise, and we solve by linearization. So notation, we have Ru, which will be Rubato, but without noise, so without the last novel step. Then we have W, which is the key stream that we get from running Ru. And Rubato M and Ru M will be Rubato and Ru, except we execute all the steps modulo M instead of modulo Q. So we look at the first step, and we want to recover the key and the noise modulo M. So we are given, not given a key, but there is a key in set Q to the N, and set I is the output of Rubato, where you input the key, the nonce, and the counter. And we do this S times. Then we know that set I is equal to WI plus EI. So Rubato without noise plus the noise, modulo Q, where EI has been sampled from D alpha Q. Then, since we want to recover the key modulo M, what we do is we guess the key modulo M. So we make a guess K tilde in set M to the N, and we run Ru M with this K tilde. This will give us something, WI tilde, and we compute EI tilde, which is set I mod M minus WI tilde. And then we want to know, is this EI tilde the same as the noise modulo M, which is what we want to recover? So what we know about EI is that it has been sampled from D alpha Q, which means that if EI tilde is sampled uniformly at random, then that is definitely a wrong guess. But if EI tilde has been sampled from D alpha Q modulo M, then we have guessed right, which means that once we have found this EI tilde that is sampled from D alpha Q, EI tilde will be equal to EI mod M. And we have also found KI mod M because this is the guess with which we arrive to this EI tilde. So with this analysis, we have found the key and the noise modulo some factor of Q. What we do then to recover the positions with no noise is we divide Q by M and we take another factor F. But we make sure that F can be factorized into different terms that are all smaller or equal than M. So we can repeat the first step, modulo FJM instead of modulo M for each of the J's. And then we recover again by the same steps. We recover the key and the noise modulo FJM. And with all this information and all the factors of F, we recover the key and the noise modulo Fm. Now, imagine that F is such that the absolute value of EI is smaller than Fm with high probability. So if that is the case, then EI modulo Fm is 0 implies that EI mod Q is 0. And this will happen often enough because 0 is sampled from d alpha Q at a rate 1 over alpha Q. So all we have to do is the first dot, so the first step where we recover everything mod Fm, look at where we get 0, and then those are the positions in which no noise has been added. So we collect all this in a set I. This is just the indices in which EI is just 0 modulo Q. So once we have that, we know that for every I in I, Wi is equal to set I. And we can take exactly these equations to set up a system that depends on the key coordinates, but no noise has been added. And because no noise has been added, we can just solve by Gaussian elimination by taking every prime factor of Q and combining it using the Chinese remainder. So the complexity for this step is given in this table. This is the complexity for only a prime factor of Q, and this will have to be repeated at most 26 times. So we see it's quite low. Of course, this is only one step of the attack, so it has to be added to other complexities, but we will look into that later. But it is quite low. So this attack doesn't always work, as I said before, and there are some assumptions that need to be true in order for this attack to actually work. So the first assumption is that there actually exists some integer m that is a factor of Q and that lies in some interval. So to determine this interval, we see that m cannot be too large because we need m to the n to be smaller than 2 to the lambda for the first step to work and to have a valid attack. So then we set m max to be the floor function of 2 to the lambda over n. On the other hand, m cannot be too small because we need to be able to distinguish the correct EI modulo m from a random one. And because of that, we need to find the smallest m, an integer, such that it is possible to distinguish the correct key guess, k tilde mod m, from all the wrong ones. So the way we do this is we build this score function. And this score function will measure how much the candidate noise values deviates from that is produced from KT, that deviates from the uniform distribution in the same way that the alpha Q does. So what this means is that if the score is high, then the candidate noise value deviates a lot from uniform, which is a good thing because that's what we want. We don't want it to be uniform. So that's a right guess. But if the score is around 0, then it is very close to being uniform distribution. So we don't want that, and we continue this. In these images, I hope you can see some spikes going up from there, but basically you see that this is the score value, and you see from different key guesses that you can always see a spike going up that determines this is the correct guess of the key. So we just need M to be big enough such that there is a spike that we can see, and it's not just hidden in the rest of the bars. So there's a caveat to this, which is that we observed that the wrong key guesses do not produce noise values that are distributed uniformly at random, which is what you would assume. So we had to find the minimum M heuristically, and we had to run some experiments to, in each case, determine what that would be. Second assumption and last assumption is that there exists an F, an integer, such that all prime factors of F are smaller or equal than M. Fm divides Q, and Fm is big enough. So this was to determine where the positions are that the noise that is added is 0. So what we need to find is the smallest t, an integer, such that for Fm bigger than t, with high probability, if E mod Fm is 0, then E mod Q is also 0. This comes down to finding the smallest t in Z, such that the absolute value of EI is smaller than t with high probability for all these i's, which if we're happy with high probability being 0.99, then this means that we have to find the smallest t in Z that satisfies this inequality. And here we just plug in sigma and alpha Q depending on the parameters, and we can start finding this T, the smallest T that satisfies this. So as it turns out, there are values of Q that satisfy both of these assumptions. So that means that these values of Q give weak instances of Rubato and should be avoided in a use case because of the attack. So except for the last variant of Rubato in which M min is bigger than M max, so we cannot do anything, we have that at least 25% of the possible choices for Q are bad choices of Q in the sense that they give rise to attack. And it goes up to even 58% of the choices of Q for one of the variants. So I can skip this. And we can go to the attack complexities. The lowest attack complexity is found when M is the minimum it could be, and F is this power of 2. And the key recovery attack complexity is then given by the sum of the complexities of all 3 steps. So the first step has complexity M to the n because we are doing, we're guessing the key modulo M and the key has length n. The step 2, if F is 2 to the G, then has complexity G times 2 to the n. And step 3 is the linearization step. So it has complexity linearization step. And this is what I showed you before in the table, which depends on each case on what Q is. But we found these assumptions on Q in each of the variants to be the ones that give rise to the lowest time complexities of the key recovery attack. And we see in the time complexities that they are well below 2 to the 80 / 2 to the 128. So yes, so that's an attack. So there are ways to restore the security of Rubato. The first and most intuitive one would be, okay, let Q be a prime. Then Q doesn't have small factors, and we cannot do anything else. Another alternative would be to increase the width of the noise distribution. This is done or can be done so that we cannot distinguish the key modulo M for M small enough. But increasing the width of the noise distribution would imply more noise, which we all know implies loss of precision and accuracy in decrypting the places. So a different alternative would be to add more rounds. This could be done so that the solving complexity of the linearization is too high for the attack to work, but adding more rounds implies higher multiplicative depth, which is an enemy for FHEP. And the last one is using non-polynomial S-boxes. Then we don't have a polynomial representation of the S-box. We cannot make the system of equations, and we cannot perform the attack. But this also implies a loss of efficiency because of the use case as well. So in conclusion, I presented a key recovery attack of 5 out of 6 instances of Rubato for at least 25% of the choices on Q. And there's experimental verification of the attack. That's the slide I skipped, but I can come back to it if there's any questions. And finally, and I would say most importantly, actually, this attack is treated in the paper by a discussion of the analysis of the security of symmetric primitives over rings set Q. So I really encourage you to read the paper, see what we have done, because we see that every time more and more ciphers, symmetric ciphers are coming out that are defined over rings. We don't know enough about the security of symmetric primitives over rings. So it is a good motivation for everyone to start working on this. We try to start filling this gap. This is just an example, but there is more to come. So I encourage everyone of you to start working on rings. And other than that, that's it. So thank you for your attention. Hope you liked it.
Are there any questions?
Have you actually
we have run the attack, but not fully. So we have only guessed on maybe like only one part of the matrix instead of all of it. So I would say in some cases we have run it fully, but I would say only for the cases where the complexity was the lowest.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, and that's worked as far as I'm concerned. So I hope there's no mistakes.
Other questions? So you said that Rubato could be run for more rounds, but of course that comes at a cost and efficiency and so on. Do you think that it's still a viable system if it's run for more? The efficiency, is it anywhere that it still makes sense?
So I don't know how many more rounds you would have to add in order for it to become secure. And I don't happen to know that much about FHE to know like what is efficient and what would not be efficient anymore. It's just all I know is high multiplicative depth equals bad. That's it. But I don't know how many more rounds would be needed for this. We could check. But then I'm not one to tell you if this is okay or not.
Okay, let's thank the speaker again. Thank you.